Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk, the review podcast show that takes itself less serious than John Reisinger on the spot. Today I am your host Anthony, and with me is.
Hayden.
So this is the first episode of the movie review podcast, and we're starting off with one is the basis of a lot of movies, and that is the based on a true story, All the Money in the World. Unlike conventional shows, we are actually going to start off with our score, and personally, I'm going to rate this at like $100,000 of John Paul Getty's money. How about yourself, Hayden?
Um, I'm going to rate this at. Oh, that's a difficult one. Probably about 2/3 of an ear for this film.
Okay, okay, I see where you're going with that. Uh, it was a difficult movie to like, but before we actually jump into it, just a brief uh, synopsis on what the film actually is. This was based on the life of John Paul Getty, the American oil tycoon that made billions upon billions upon billions, and his grandson, is it?
Yep,
Is
his
it grandson?
grandson, John Paul Getty the third,
Uh,
getting kidnapped.
yeah, so he gets kidnapped in Italy, and they want a ransom for him, and he says that you won't pay it. There's reasons for that. It shows you a flashback where the mother of John Paul Getty III takes all her children away from the family and stuff like that. Uh, but it's based on a true story. If you want to read about it, you're able to just Google search John Paul Getty and you'll find the actual story itself. But let's actually sit down and talk about the movie itself. So, what was your thoughts on like the actual story? Was it a compelling story to you or anything like that?
Uh, I think that the premise has a really good premise for a story, and narratively, it was set out nicely. I think it just seemed to drag in the wrong places at certain points, is what I was feeling while watching it.
Yeah, it definitely the scenes with like the actual like the hostage taken and seeing the kidnappers, that stuff all seemed to be very you know drawn out, like you said. Uh, and then there were some scenes where the mother on I can't remember the mother's name, but her like on her own in the house and stuff like that. It took a long time to get through. It was definitely a 2 hour movie that could have been cut down to 80 to 90 minutes, I reckon.
Mm. I think there was quite a big cast of characters when you actually look at it that they had to try and introduce. They had to try and they were trying to go pretty deep with as many characters as they could. Like even to down to the developing the kidnapper's character, and I thought he had a brilliant story. The kidnapper, he was just a guy trying to make a quick buck, and in the end, he
Yeah,
just wants the kid to be okay.
yeah, and then on top of that, they threw in a couple of maybe unnecessary stories. The whole idea of like the kidnapping being a plan by the young John Paul Getty to try and get money off of his grandfather, which was basically the first half of the movie. Was That's what they all thought was happening, uh,
Yeah,
and then sort of switching it over in the second
yeah, they
half.
could have quite easily cut that chunk out and gone straight from um,
Yeah,
he's been kidnapped into the so that middle quarter or so.
yeah, it was definitely unnecessary. Other than maybe just a 3 minute, 4 minute selection of scenes, going from saying they were talking about it before, so I mean anything's possible to right. Okay, this is actually genuine. It's not fake.
Mm.
Uh, and since you used it as your rating. What was your thoughts on the cutting off of the ear scene?
I thought that was really bad. There was a lot of emotions being played there, and it was you could tell that it was definitely not the first kidnapper's idea, and not something he really wanted to do at all. Um, and it was quite gruesome. Like it took it's compared to the rest of the film, you suddenly go, oh, things are getting serious.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, it looked so well done. Which is something that I'm not going to say a lot of for this movie. I personally was not a huge fan. Uh, but the cinematography and the effects that they've used, both visual and like physical effects, using like props and things like that, it was just amazing how well they done that scene. Was sort of expecting more to come off though. It was really just like a small little bit of the year.
Yeah, it was yeah, that's fine. It was like a third of his ear in the end. They took off, wasn't it? Like
Uh,
it like it took about a half because you got lots like especially when you see it in the male, it's mostly just the lobe and the outside.
yeah, I was really expecting like an entire ear, like
But again,
you see in so
that's
many other movies
I
and
guess
stuff.
that's probably not all that realistic
Yeah.
when you think about what they're trying to cut. They're just trying to cut what's there. Probably it's easy.
Right. So, what other scenes were there in the movie that are pretty interesting?
Um, I feel a scene I feel that should have had a lot more emotional weight than it felt for me was the death of Getty Senior.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I
I can definitely see that.
it seemed like it just happened really suddenly, and we were meant to feel an emotional connection to it. Like it was filmed like we were meant to have an emotional connection to this character who'd only been sort of had a half redemption in the previous scene when he actually gave his money towards it.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that we're going to talk about pretty soon. The whole thing of Charlie Plummer being John Paul Getty. Uh, if I,
And but
do you know,
I think he did a really good job.
do you know what? We'll go straight into this. So there was controversy uh,
Yeah,
about this movie, which, uh, in my opinion, it has affected how good the movie is. So, Kevin Spacey was originally John Paul Getty when the movie was in production, but due to circumstances last year that I don't want to get into in any depth, uh, Charlie Plummer came into. Was it Charlie Plummer? Is that his name?
yeah. It
Christopher
was Plummer,
Christopher Plummer.
Christopher Plummer.
Christopher Plummer.
Uh, well, the movie had completely wrapped and was a month away from release before. Let's just call it the incident for
Yeah,
occurred with
Kevin
his name
Spacey.
was Kevin Spacey, and Plummer was actually the first choice to play the role of Getty for names are escaping me today. The director
Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott. Yeah, I really should remember the name Ridley Scott. He's this new indie director. Um, no, he was the first choice, um, and they then brought him in to refilm the scenes, and I think they did really well, except for definitely the desert scenes in Saudi Arabia. You could definitely tell he'd been added in there. Other than that, I think they did a pretty good job of inserting him in. Do you not, or maybe you have a different thought on the matter to me? But
Uh, it's it's kind of difficult, hearing that they filmed everything with him in 10 days. In terms of all the reshoots, was a surprise because he was in quite a large chunk of the movie.
oh, I didn't realize he was in it. I thought they did like 2 weeks of filming, not like two full on weeks, not like rushed in 10 days.
Yeah, it was everything done. All the reshoots were done in 10 days. But personally, the biggest issue I have with it, and I don't know if anyone out there will agree with me, but Mark Wahlberg's like emotion in some of those scenes is just non-existent.
Yeah, he very much looked like they'd cast an action hero in a drama.
I mean, like, see the scenes that you don't see Christopher Plummer in, so the scenes that are most likely from the original shoot. It's so good. Like, if you think back to that scene in the desert where he's talking to the two sheikhs, that looks like a whole different Mark Wahlberg to the one that you see talking to John Paul Getty when they're doing clay pigeon shooting. It's
Mm.
it's just such a character difference, such an emotional difference. He just didn't look invested at that point anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can imagine why if you completely shot a movie and you've got to come back and
Yeah,
reshoot it for the not because the scene was bad, but because they wanted to replace the actor.
it's definitely difficult to do, especially after you've thought, I'm no longer in this character. For him, he's probably moved on to 3 or 4 different characters since the wrap on production.
Hmm.
So it's going to be difficult for them. But it felt, and that's something I'm going to say a lot. It felt like there was a lack of emotion throughout the movie, and I do feel as though
Definitely
it's
across.
the
Yeah.
reshoots that have caused that.
Well, I wouldn't even say like there's some points in this movie where I'm like, you're meant to feel lots of emotion, and some it does come across as quite an emotional film,
Yeah,
but you feel like it's not deserved in some cases. Like you haven't quite got attached to the characters enough as you should do.
yeah. There was definitely no real way to relate to a lot of the situations in the movie, which obviously is difficult with it being a movie about someone who has literally a lot
All of the money in the world.
uh, but yeah, it's really you sort of understand. I mean, some of the scenes that I think back to are when John Paul Getty the third is responding to his grandfather's letters, and he says something along the lines of, "If I respond and help everyone, then I wouldn't have any money, just like you." And that's cold. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. Is that's cold. It's true, but it's cold.
Yeah, and I think in terms of character, that is a really good character moment. That shows you who he is, and it builds up this certain type of character, which is probably why I didn't like the scene where he died, because it builds up this character to be someone who's ruthless and really stingy with their money, and they know they have their own plan on how everything's going to go and what they're doing with their money, and then he suddenly just goes, "Oh, screw it, give them the money away," because Mark Wahlberg told him to.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting one. I would love to see a cut of the original production footage. Just to
see how different it would have turned out.
just to see the difference, because one of the things that I did think that was rushed was the death scene. I feel as though, the fact that they done all their reshoots in 10 days definitely didn't do the death a service. And I think they probably spent a lot more time with Kevin Spacey in doing that scene. The whole end of the movie is very
like it tries to tie it up really quickly.
Yeah, it tries to go in really fast, and it also is very tropic of movies in that sort of genre. It's resolution, it's happiness. You kind of see everything coming. When the mother walks into the boardroom, I mean, instantly I'm thinking, right, okay, he's dead, she's getting all the money, because either the son's already dead or the son is like no longer a safe choice. It's just going to go straight to the grandson.
Yeah.
So you already kind of knew that was coming. The guy was very much he was focused on himself. you could tell that. So the whole scene of like him with a bust as one of the last
Mm.
scenes of the movie, I kind of seen coming. I didn't see it coming, but I kind of knew that something like that was going to happen. It was going to be a bust or a
Mm.
painting or a statue,
Yeah,
something like that.
and I think that was very that suits his character.
Yeah, it was very much all about himself, and that was it down to a T. Uh, any other big scenes for you?
I feel like there's some things in this film that didn't pay off. Like, I don't really see the point in connecting um, when they go to the ruins. When Paul and Getty Senior
Oh,
go
the
to the ruins and they're
Colosseum.
talking, and they have a lot. Yeah, they have a lot of scenes. They have quite a few scenes where it shows that they're building up a connection, and the grandfather he's really mentoring this kid, and I was expecting it to pay off in some way in the kid, like that he would come out and he would show some of his grandfather's ruthlessness at some point, and actually have. At the end of the day, he ended up more like a talking MacGuffin.
He just seemed like he was an entitled child. That was the only real
Which
thing I got from him, which is weird because he
which
didn't
which
have
is
access to
which
the money.
no.
Uh,
Well, he kind of did up until the point where he had to come home.
well, yeah.
Yeah, and I get the fact that he was an entitled child, but I can see why he became it. But I thought that there'd be some, like he would come out looking like some sort of version of his grandfather, and not just like a kid who doesn't know which end of a stick is what. Like he's just his character. He had no real character. He showed what one scene probably showed that he could think and do stuff for himself,
And that was
which
the
was
fire.
the fire scene. And I think that scene served probably to grow the character of the kidnapper more than
Yeah,
anything
the whole
anything
thing of him
else.
walking around and seeing the fire
And seeing the kid run off.
and just not doing anything for a second, just letting it happen.
Mm.
He's obviously realizing at that point that he's definitely made a mistake.
Yeah.
The only other thing was the fake out on that following scene. Where he gets to the road and he finds a car that picks him up and they take him home and he calls his mother,
Yeah.
and then it actually transpires that the guy who picked him up actually worked for was I don't even remember.
Well, I think he was a bent cop. I think that's what he was meant to be.
It was something like that.
Because he was
It has
wearing
to
a
have been.
uniform.
But the guy who bought him effectively,
Mm.
the fact that he worked for him was kind of I didn't quite expect that. I'm going to be brutally honest.
No,
I didn't see that coming.
I, I did when he was on the phone.
Yeah, when once like it was such a hesitant, carrying the phone from the table to the table
Mm.
and all that sort of stuff. And when you get to that point, it definitely still lacked like some emotion. It felt as though there was something coming.
Yeah, and I think the whole film suffers from that because even before when they're like, "We found your son's dead body," like, well, no, you won't have, because we've still got ages of this film left.
Yeah, that was a
Like
very
it's going to have been the other guy who gets shot. We saw that in the setup when they were pointing their guns.
yeah. You know that even though they're both holding the gun at them, that one of the
And
two
they're
are going
not
to.
going to kill the kid because he's worth too much.
And in the end, what was the final pay? It was 4 million.
4 million down from 17 million.
That's not good hostage negotiation.
Well, I mean, it is if you're
Yeah, if you're on
the
the
person trying to get the guy
yeah,
released.
if you're on the good side of it, it's good. But
And I never saw it go down. Like it went down to 10 million.
yeah, it just sort of like jumped.
It was like 10 or 9 million or something. It went down from 17 when he phoned back up, and I thought that was quite a good scene about negotiation.
And outside of that, 17 million is a weird number. How do you arrive at 17? Why not 18? Why not 19? Why not 16? such a weird number to choose, especially for someone who I think it was back in the 60s when they were doing the Playboy interview. He says he has over $1 billion at that point. So 17 million is like interest,
Yeah.
which is a very disgusting way to put it. Imagine having a bank account with £17 million interest. That would be great. I would
Yeah.
I would live the life off the interest off 17 million. Never mind 17 million interest. But no, I do agree that the movie definitely lost a lot of something. I don't quite know what to put it down
Yeah,
to.
like I didn't dislike this movie. I think that's the thing. I didn't come out of this movie going, "Well, I've wasted my time here." I came out going, "That was an alright movie. It wasn't the best movie I've seen, and it's definitely not going to be the best movie I see this year. Probably not the best movie I'll see this week, but
Yeah.
it's also not one I come going, I've wasted the ticket. The ticket money wasn't worth it. It was
Do you know, the first thought, once the credits came on screen, my first thought was, this might be a bad choice for movie number one. Because I mean, as you can see in this podcast here, I'm struggling to find a lot of good things to talk about, which is why my review score was so low. Uh, it's not been great. It wasn't, it's not going to win any Oscars or Golden Globes or any other awards. It's not an excellent movie. It's a story. It's a true story, well told.
yeah.
And those types of movies don't tend to be the extravagant, it's not Avengers. Avengers is going to be great later in the year.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
something
this.
like,
It's one of those movies that would probably be one of those ones you'll just sit and watch on Netflix in a couple of months' time.
yeah, it's definitely something that,
It's something you can sit and watch, or you can sit and put it in the background while you do something else, or it can just be there. And it's a film I think is definitely deserving of being a film. And it's not that's the problem. It sits in this moment where I'm going, it's not bad, but at the same time, it's not good.
yeah, it's not bad, which is a good thing, but
Yeah,
it
it's what I don't want to slam it for being bad, but I can't praise it for being good at the same time.
and do you know what? See, since we've just started talking about slamming it, let's sit down and have a wee look at some of the reviews on some of the uh, big movie review sort of stuff. So, what do you want to start with? Do you want to start with Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, so Rotten Tomatoes, it got 77% overall, average
Which
rating of 7 out of 10.
77 is a lot. I really, I'm surprised at it being as high as that.
I would say I was surprised, but at the same time, I can see it being one of those films that critics like watching.
Yeah, I suppose you're definitely right in that
It's
regard.
it's it's yeah, because I can imagine a critic sitting down and going, "Oh, this is what I became a critic to watch, this sort of film that I wouldn't normally watch, because it isn't really one of those films you go out of your way to watch, is it? I know I definitely wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't for this show.
Yeah, it's definitely, if there was any other movie that I thought was worthy, then I would have chosen that. Uh, Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, depending on how you want to describe it, All the Money in the World was the first movie to be released this year.
And there you go.
So what about
So,
who else?
um, What are you looking for?
Do you know what? Here's one that sort of goes along the same lines as mine. The Guardian gave it 2 out of 5. Uh, Sort of along the same line. I'm thinking less than 50% for sure. Uh, let's see if I can pull up a wee quote.
This is a good one from the Financial Times.
Go for
It's
it.
an odd film. It engages without satisfying.
Yeah, I can definitely
That,
agree.
I think, pretty much hits the nail on the head.
I can definitely agree with that. It is definitely it's definitely satisfying.
Actually, no, I would swap what he'd said. Yeah, you're right. I would say he's put engages without satisfying. I would say it's satisfying without being engaging.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I just couldn't remember the other word that they used. What was the? Let me see here. Two men in their 80s. Nah, forget that.
A lot of people are really praising Plummer.
Uh,
A
well,
lot of the critics love Plummer in this film.
you've got to remember all of his scenes, which was a substantial amount of the movie, were done in 10 days after production wrapped.
So he's, well, for some of them, you can clearly see he was stood by himself in a green screen.
Yeah, some of those scenes are pretty obvious and it makes it easier to do. But, you're talking about like the scenes in the mansion with him and Mark Wahlberg.
I think actually I thought he played the character that he was handed well.
Yeah, he
I just don't think it was quite the character the story needed.
Yeah,
it needed someone who valued family probably slightly more than he did.
Yeah, it's something that is fairly evident with pretty much all of the characters. It's definitely they're good characters, but the combination of them all just didn't quite gel.
Mm.
Which is kind of difficult to say in a movie based on a true story. When you think about it like that.
Well, yeah, well, that's how life is, isn't it? Not everything quite works, but at the same time, when you're adapting it to screenplay, you can take them. You can take it in a more creative direction.
You can,
and you probably should have done.
They definitely could have changed some of the things there to make it a little bit more suspenseful, a little bit more interesting. The final outcome was obviously always going to be the same. He was always going to die, and the money was going to get passed down. He was never going to pay the ransom, although it would have made a very interesting movie if he paid the ransom right at the start. It would have been one of the shortest movies in history.
Well, no, I reckon it could have been a very interesting movie. It could have been about why you shouldn't just pay the ransom, because then it could have been a movie about somebody else getting kidnapped, and like you could have had multiple hostages.
Yeah, I can sort of see.
And it could have, when they say at the beginning about setting a precedent, it could have been a film about what happens when you do set that sort of precedent.
You make a very good point. He did say that towards the start of it. If he paid 17 million for one of his grandsons at that point, he's got 16 grandchildren.
And yeah.
So yeah, no, I can see where you're going with that. That's actually a very good point, and
I thought that might possibly even make a more interesting movie than what we had. It's possible to do, though it completely changes the story, and it wouldn't have been the same story.
Yeah, you definitely would lose the based on a true story.
Yeah, it would.
Aspect, which is sort of it's one of the better things. It's something
it hangs its coat on. It's what this film hangs its coat on, really, isn't it?
It very much relies on being true, which isn't an easy thing to do. And it is one of those things, when I was on my drive back home from the cinema to see it, I really got to thinking, this might actually be worth investigating just to see what really happened and read into it. And then a lot of things happened, like trying to get this podcast recorded, amongst another million different projects. Uh, so, we're at 35 minutes now. We're pretty much going to wrap up at this point. But before we do, Ridley Scott calls you into his office and says, "Here's the footage. You can make one change to the movie. What do you change?" In fact,
I would.
do you know what? Let's change it. Here's the keys to the movie. You can do anything you want. So this is
I
either
would.
pre-production, production, or post-production.
Um, I would change how Senior was written. I would change it so that throughout the whole movie you can see he has a much more deeper conflict about helping his favorite grandson. Like that show that he does have a really much more intimate connection to this person, and it's not just someone he's heard of and met twice.
Yeah, so like sell the relationship more than they do.
Yeah, sell the relationship so that so that he then does have a dilemma of do I pay this or not, and he kind of wants to pay the ransom but knows that Ruth was part of him, which is a really good character trait. Um, is sort of like competing, like, yeah, but if we do this, like, then everyone's going to get kidnapped, and then people will be going, why doesn't I help someone else? And so it just show that he has some sort of internal conflict in him, and that he doesn't just have a change of heart in the last part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about that, one of the best ways to do that would just be to reorder the movie. See the whole thing of it starting with the kidnapping? I feel as though you definitely lose a lot of the momentum there. It would have been far more interesting if they'd done it from, the start chronologically. Show John Paul Getty the third, in San Francisco, then coming over to Rome and becoming part of the family, and show that relationship,
Yeah,
then the kidnapping, so that it really it settles that right down the middle sort of situation there. Uh, Personally, I've said it already in the review. I would love to see the original footage,
yeah.
just to see what the difference is, because there, if let me try and work out the best way to word this.
Whether to see whether, because I imagine the cut is pretty much the same as the final one, and all they did was take the scenes they knew they needed and refilmed with Plummer.
Yes, but
And I
the
want to see
interesting thing, yeah,
how
it's
the
the
character
emotion.
interactions were different with an actor.
Yeah, if the movie was exactly the same as it is with Kevin Spacey in it, then that would worry me. Because there was a lot of issues with like character performance, in my opinion, in the scenes that were redone. Uh, which is it does it makes sense because they were redone. They were redone quickly. But if the original movie, that movie was in production for quite a while. It was like 2-3 months from what I remember.
Yeah, they
Uh,
were a month away from release. They were about to release it. Release date sorted. They were doing the press thing, and then they went, "We're cutting him from the film and recasting him with Plummer."
I wonder if, and it obviously ties back into what I would change. I wonder if it would have just been worthwhile, keeping Kevin Spacey in,
Well,
just just because it would have made logical sense at that point.
yeah, it was definitely a to please public opinion move.
Yeah, which obviously makes sense if you,
As the film wasn't released yet,
yeah, if you're
wasn't it?
going to stay controversial, it could have affected the sales figures and things like that. So
Yeah, yeah. A film released after, like, a month after that, everything came out about Kevin Spacey, basically starring Kevin Spacey, that film would have been Just no one would have gone to it on principle.
Yeah, and then outside of that, this is award season as well. So the whole Me Too movement and things like that is very much in the forefront, and that would have just destroyed any possibility of that movie being successful.
Yeah.
Uh, Anything else you want to say about it?
Ridley Scott's still not back. he's trying to recapture his previous success, but he's not quite done it yet.
Well, I mean, he's made some pretty amazing movies. It's difficult to do that every single time.
I know, but he's wobbled. Like, he had a really good streak, and then he's sort of wobbled off, hasn't he? And he's
Right. Let's have a little look to see what movies he has coming up on our slate for 2018. Okay, that was no help.
He's got a Alien Covenant sequel in the works, and a Battle of Britain movie as a director.
Yeah, there's nothing this year though, which is
not as a director. He's got producer credits.
Yeah.
To the End of the Earth, but Zoe, The Passage, Aftermath, episode of Strange Angel. Yeah, it's going to be a quiet year for him.
Yeah, it's
Even
not
All the Money in the World still classed as a 2017 movie.
Yeah, it released.
I think it released in America just before years.
It released in Christmas Day in the US for critics or something like that, which makes it a 2017 release, even though it wasn't like a public thing until 2018. Right, I think we will pretty much call it there. Next podcast. So, funnily enough, the way this is working out, this is actually being released on Monday the 15th. The podcast is going to be weekly on a Wednesday, so the next one is actually in 2 days' time. And it's going to be on The Darkest Hour. It's another based on a true story. Hopefully, it's much better executed.
The trailer was on when we were in the cinema for this, and I'm stoked for this movie. It looks like it's going to be a really good telling of the story of Winston Churchill.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I want to see what they do with some aspects of Winston Churchill's life. But yeah, so next time, I was about to say next week, but it's actually 2 days' time for anyone listening to this. We will be talking about The Darkest Hour, and I'm very much excited. I hope everyone else is. Any closing remarks, Hayden?
Don't get rich, get your ears cut off.
Well, no, you can get rich. It just means that someone else in your family gets their ear cut off.
Oh, then go for it. Go and get rich.
I think one of the best lines in the movie was that the editors of his book wanted him to change the title.
That was
from How to Be Rich to How to Get Rich.
Yeah.
And his response was, it's easy to get rich, but it's difficult to be rich. And we're going to end on that. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in. Look for The Darkest Hour on Wednesday, and then every Wednesday following that there will be a brand new movie. If things have went well in the edit, what you've been seeing on the screen right now is the poster for every single movie we plan on reviewing in 2018. If it hasn't, then it's just been a picture of the poster for All the Money in the World. I haven't quite found out if that's been done yet. Yeah, so there will also, the front of the year is stacked with movies. Uh, you know, we've got Darkest Hour coming next week, but then the following week there is The Post, The Commuter, and Coco all on the 19th. So what's going to happen is we're going to have our weekly slot, but all these extra movies will be covered, and we'll be doing some special ones throughout those weeks. Uh, so look out for it. And I'm happy that we finally get to start talking about movies, and it's
Woohoo.
going to be a very common occurrence. Thank you all for